I do a little bit of the other too.
Welcome everybody to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Ed Committee of the Whole meeting for April 14th, 2015. Tonight we're going to have a Secretary Pro Tem, Leanne Charlot, so could you please take a roll call vote? Leanne?
Mark Berry.
Present.
Leanne Charlotte present. Julie Gatschall.
Present.
Richard Haig.
Present.
Christine Letchinger absent. John Rosen.
Present.
Susan Ryder.
Present.
Okay, good evening everybody. Thank you for coming. Big crowd here tonight. We've just come out of closed session, which we have begun preliminary discussions about the board vacancy, which I will get into momentarily. We begin our meetings as we do every week with the opportunity for public comment. So if anybody in the audience would like to address the board, please don't hesitate to do so, or we can do that now. If nobody would like to do that, we'll move on and go to item 4, which is the addition of a discussion item. Jean will update us on the status of this enrollment project, but if anybody would like to recommend a discussion item or a future agenda item, now is the time to do that. Otherwise, Jean can just...
That's one thing that Jay and I just talked about this morning. We will be emailing John, Mark, and Leanne is also asked to be part of discussing where we are with this so we can present it and get it off our slate. So dates should go out no later than Thursday on getting that meeting scheduled.
Moving on to discussions. Item A, board vacancy. Right off the bat, I want to announce to the board and to the community at large that board member Christine Letchinger has submitted her resignation to the board for personal family reasons. It was effective April 8th last week, and the board will begin the process of appointing a replacement to fill out the balance of her term. Please don't hesitate to jump in if I misspeak or say something. And I want to start the conversation by going through the process for the board, and then we're going to have some discussion about some of the things that we need to work out. I'm going to outline the timeline as we see it. Basically, school
Also
code.
in your folders.
Yeah, I give you a folder.
Remember to
I give you a
say that.
folder with your name on it. That's got some of this information in it. School code requires that from the date of the resignation, we have 45 days to appoint a new board member. That takes us to May 22nd, and to try to not have to add many additional meetings, we're going to try to wrap this up by May 12th, which is an already scheduled committee of the whole meeting. So April 8th, Christine notified the board, and I called all you guys. April 9th, we sent a letter to the Regional Office of Education, that's Royce Lee Wood. They have to be notified in writing as soon as we can after this happens. On the 13th, which was yesterday, Jean and I met, we developed a timeline, we developed a candidate questionnaire and an announcement letter. Between the time that Christine resigned and yesterday, Jean and I have had multiple conversations with our lawyers, with our representative from the IASB, from the Lake Forest High School Board and their administrators, because they went through this twice in the past 2 years, as well as with key community members to make certain people aware of what's going on. Today, we make our official announcement, and tomorrow, at which time we will review and discuss the timeline and commit to how we are going to this process. We have some choices to make, whether we screen candidates' applications by committee, and when we're going to do that, and when it comes time for interviewing candidates, do we do that by committee or the entire board? So I'll come back to that. Tomorrow, we will, the community can look online on the Lake Bluff website, school district website, for the official application to be given consideration for the open board position. We will notify all the media outlets in the area about the opening, and we've already put together a letter that Jean and I worked on, and I'm going to sign tonight and send it out. that all the media outlets will have, that Jean will send to parents and use her electronic database of contacts to communicate the letter. We have decided that there will be a 2-week window for interested parties to complete and submit applications to Terry Simon, who's the board clerk. Those will be due April 29th. And then very shortly after the 29th, something like April 30th or May 1 or 2, we will convene either the board or a committee to screen applications and narrow it down to a handful, perhaps 3, for interviews. At the same time, that same committee will develop a list of questions, interview questions, to present to these candidates when we do bring them in. So then we will move on to the week of May 4th, where we will decide on a specific day to interview candidates all on the same time, because it'll be impossible to get a 7-member board or a committee together on 2 different nights or that day. You can even do it on a Saturday if we wanted to. So we'll decide on whether it's committee or board. We'll commit to dates. And then on our committee of the whole meeting on May 12th, we will vote this person in and swear them in, and they'll take their spot and complete the balance of Christine's term. So in terms of timeline and process, does anybody have any questions? Does it all make sense?
Yeah.
So I wanted to just say something publicly. If anybody happens to be listening or sees this on video, I'd be glad to sit down with potential candidates if they have questions or want to get some additional details about what the job involves. Don't hesitate to reach out to me through my email addresses on the website. It's probably the easiest way to get it. And we can sit down and have coffee and discuss what we do and the time commitment involved and what a day in the life of a potential board member. I'm sure other board members and administrators would be glad to answer those kinds of questions as well. So I guess the first thing to do is to talk about the committee, whether or not when we evaluate applications. Do we think it makes sense to have the entire board convene to do that, or a subcommittee to do that?
I mean, I will speak for myself. I'd like to be part of the process. Whether I'm part of the process as part of a subcommittee or part of the whole board is fine with me. I think maybe in part the answer is driven by how many people wish to be actively engaged in the process.
I feel the same.
Yeah, I do too.
So either we've just formed a committee or...
or it's a quorum of a board.
Susan?
Well, it doesn't have to be unanimous. I mean, it's a quorum of a board if we do that. I mean, that's fine. So it would have to be a posted meeting.
Mhm.
And, okay, so we'll do it as a board and do our best to nail down one day to synthesize all this stuff. And we can do all that in closed session because we're talking about specific individuals. How about the interview process? By committee or by the entire board?
Is that something that needs to be decided now? Because we may have a clearer path once we see what we've got, how many people there are to work with, you know, how aligned our thoughts are on
Dates, as long as you guys are willing to set dates tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we set the dates and then we can
Okay.
decide as we go along.
So let's everybody look in their calendars, and we're going to talk about a date to review and screen applications, something like April 30th, May 1st, or May 2nd.
It's Thursday, Friday, or Saturday.
Any of those dates will work for me. Well, actually, no.
Depends on the time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So why don't we start with April 30th? Who could do evening on April 30th?
I could do the evening.
I could.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
So April 30th in the evening works?
Yes.
What time do you, I can't imagine it would take you that long to screen applications. So,
You can't?
all right.
And what I'm picturing is you'll disseminate the applications first, so we have them and we can go through them ourselves and then we meet to discuss.
Yeah.
Right.
how to win them down.
So name a time, the evening of April 30th.
6 o'clock is good.
6 o'clock?
6 o'clock.
6:02 to make sure the train gets here on time.
Kevin, you gotta change your technology committee. No, I'm just teasing.
And the place would probably be, what, the district office? That's up to you?
Can we do it here?
We'd have to
It
check.
depends if they're available.
So are you looking at the fishbowl room downstairs? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Yeah.
So 6 p.m. on the 30th.
If we can't get that, are you open to the middle school? Is that closer? Or the elementary school?
Yes.
Middle school's good with me. Or
Middle school is very good.
Middle
Yeah,
school
I
is
like everyone to the library, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, any place is fine. And that's a closed session event.
Yes. Okay, 6 o'clock, April 30th, 6:02, April 30th. And we're gonna see if it's available here. If not, it'll probably be at the middle school.
I like the middle school, I kind of like the middle school better than coming here, I'd rather not be in the fishbowl.
Yeah, it's good with me.
Middle school.
It's easy to walk here.
We can face each other around the table too.
Yeah,
It's easier for the train people to get
Right.
All right, let's see if the fishbowl is open first. Conference room.
and then, okay, so we got a date and time, and we'll have to post that in advance.
Right. That's true.
We have a board meeting that Tuesday, probably, so I'll remind everybody as well. Okay, so now we're looking at candidate interviews the week of May 4th. And Jean said what Tuesday or Wednesday's out for you?
Yes. And I don't take part in the process, by the way. I'm just there. If you guys have any questions, I sit in another room.
Yeah.
I do my work. You guys come visit once in a while.
So we figure we're probably going to need 3 or 4 hours let's say we narrow it down to 3 candidates, we're probably going to need 3 hours to 45-minute interview, 15-minute debrief, and then a decision time afterwards.
6 p.m. Thursday.
Thursday the 7th.
Yeah, I can't do Fridays.
So I'm hearing Thursday, May 7th, 6 p.m.
Does that work for you guys?
That's for me.
Thursday, May 7th, 6
Susan, you
p.m.
do
That works.
Oh, Thursday, May 7th. Sorry, I was behind.
Does that work for everybody?
Do
Yeah.
we set
It's
a
okay.
length of time for these interviews now?
We had talked about, 45 minutes per?
30 minutes with
That's
approximately 15 in between.
When we've already pre-screened, I'm guessing that, I think the interview process is one of those things where, it'll fill up the time that you allow.
That's true.
What would you recommend?
I'd
Well,
recommend
I-
20 minutes to talk with a person and 20 minutes for discussion afterwards.
This board can't get anything done in
Yeah.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't see an interview especially if we're all going to participate. I see that taking longer than 20 minutes. But again, maybe we can, as long as we know we're going to start at 6 p.m., we can see how many candidates there are and what the qualifications look like and decide who's going to participate and decide then.
And I'd like to have the structure of the interview set up well before that, like the questions and who's going to administer the questions and how we're going to do it
Right. So I think we set the date now, the more particulars of the process to be
when we
determined.
determine the candidates.
Yeah.
Can the location that night be at the district office so I can have dinner ready for you? We can make it 6:15. Allow you guys time to get over there.
Okay.
Sure, that's fine.
I'll go anywhere for dinner.
Okay, so the 7th, Thursday the 7th at 6:15, we'll have candidate interviews. So to recap for those who are glued to their TV screens at home watching, if you want to apply, you need to have your applications submitted by April 29th. We will be screening applications on April 30th, and we will have interviews on May 7th. It's very hard for the board to get a date where we get all of us together at one time, so we're not going to be able to accommodate people who can't make those days. I hate to be that. It'd be very difficult to do that.
It's only one day because the screening, you don't have to do that.
Right.
Right, it's one day. But I would imagine we could do prior to a board meeting. Is there a board meeting between the 7th and the 22nd? I don't want to be too discouraging if the perfect candidate is out there but is out of town
There
on
really
the 7th.
isn't. There's no board meeting in between.
Logistics.
Okay,
and
well
stuff.
we would encourage people to do everything they can.
Yeah.
I guess it would have to be in that same time frame. Like we couldn't move it significantly, but perhaps, I don't know.
And then we would
It should be a little.
be approving this person the following week at that board meeting of the 12th. As we vote on it, and then we swear them in, and they take their position. So it all happens pretty fast.
Because specifically, the board policy says, the board shall fill the vacancy within 45 days after it occurred by a public vote at a meeting of the board. So we're meeting all the qualifications. And the board policy is in your folders for that.
Let's see, is there anything else?
The letters in their files, so that they can see what's gonna be released tomorrow. The application is in your files.
The application comes from, Lake Forest did this already, and the Park District has done this a couple times, and we got theirs, and we just kind of merged some of their ideas and then refined it a little bit. It's pretty general. But it will give us, then it gives whoever is interested plenty of opportunity to say what they need to say about them.
I think it's also very appropriate for me as the superintendent at this point to thank Christine for the work that she's done the past 2 years.
We really appreciate that.
Her valuable finance experience has been critical in getting some things done, and we just want to thank her for her community service at this point for that.
And I know we all wish her the very best.
Yes.
So I think that wraps up the process having to do with filling that vacancy. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns? If not, we will move on to item 5B under discussion, which is Lakeville Middle School renovations update and fund balance conversation. Maybe we'll just start off with the easy part and highlight what do we call that meeting? The steering committee met with the architect 2 weeks ago, roughly. The architect, 2 people from the architect, along with myself and Leanne, and the president of our PTO, the president of our alliance, Nate Blackburn at the middle school, several teachers. Anybody else I'm missing?
No.
And there's a couple people, 2 people who were not able to attend, but they will be there in the future. It was our kickoff meeting for our steering committee where the architect was looking for some general direction. There was some general conversation about the 8 different ideas that were presented. And he took a lot of notes, and I'm going to ask Jean and Leanne to fill in my memory, because I didn't take notes and at a disadvantage tonight because I was very focused on this other stuff. So if you guys could give me an update that you recall.
I mean, I didn't take notes either. We reviewed what the process would look like and looked at some of the specific plans and sort of where the, information was coming from that would determine which way we would go on one thing or another. We'll continue to meet.
Yeah, and I think he reviewed the ideas. He wanted to make sure that all of us received all the feedback from both when it came to the board and what different community members and different people that filled out the little affinity diagrams with the dots. And really we shared that we would be starting the fund balance discussion this evening and that would carry on through June. So, and we'll have another meeting this Thursday.
And I made a point, now that this is triggering some memories, I made a point to kind of drill home the point with the architect how important this whole fund balance conversation is, that we really have not had any of that conversation, and that every time we talk about the renovation at the middle school, it spins into spending and could blow through millions and millions of dollars, and we need to really set a budget, decide what we can spend from our current fund balance and cap it and decide, have all those conversations beforehand, because otherwise they're going to keep presenting things that stretch our limits, and they're salespeople, it makes me uncomfortable. They're always trying to do that, but that's what they do, so you've got to rein that in.
I think as we move forward into the next part with the fund balance, I want to put a little word of caution. Jay is going to explain the projections. Built into the projections are what we believe will be in the new teacher contract, which has not been ratified nor voted on yet at this point. So we can't get into a lot of detail as to all the figures in this. So I'm just going to caution everybody for that before we go into this. Again, this is the initial conversation. I'm gonna turn it over to Jay, and then we will kind of map this out and start the discussion.
So you have the fund balance projections in front of you. This is the base case. This does not assume any changes or reductions to state revenue with some of the bills that are going through the legislature, nor does it include any cost shift from any pension shift of cost from the state to the district. The difference between this projection and what you've seen before is, as Gene said, this is incorporating what we believe to be the salaries and benefits in our new teacher's contract. It also assumes that we are compensating we're tying the raises of other employees in the district to what the teachers are getting. So if the teachers get an X% raise, then all the other employees would receive the same amount.
That's just an assumption.
And that's
that
just an
doesn't
assumption that's
necessarily
built
have to be
into
true.
here.
Okay.
So given those assumptions, and I will say some conservative revenue assumptions, 2015 is currently would be the end of this fiscal year, so then it projects 5 years out. And so you can see it's where our expenses are growing in excess of our revenues, which is to be expected because right now our revenues are primarily property taxes, and they can only grow by more or less by the CPI. Next year it grows by 1.5% CPI plus a little bit of new property. The following year it's the CPI is only 0.8%. So
Jay, can I ask you to stop
Sure.
for just a second? I'm sorry, I didn't bring my glasses. I can't read this or that. Can you tell me the red line and this thin brown line and thick brown
sure.
line?
So those the two horizontal lines is your fund balance.
The parallel lines
Policy.
are the high and low.
So the low is 30% of operating
Gotcha.
expenses. The high line is the 50% of operating
Looks
expenses.
like 25 and 50%.
Is that what it
Okay.
says? I think
It says
that's what-
25.
I think that's what they did. If you go back and read the policy, I believe the policy says 30. I could be
Yeah,
wrong.
I think it is 30.
And-
And right now we're at 60.
Right now we're at 60, so you can see we're above the line, above that top line at 60% of operating
And as we go
expenses.
along these years, can you just...
You say the numbers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the percentage of fund balance to, is it revenue or
I
expense?
don't believe
I
that
don't think
it's
that's
on the.
No, it isn't on here, but I'm just curious. Or is what you're saying is that we finally get within the bounds of our policy in the year 2018? Is that what this says?
What this says is that given these assumptions, our fund balance will be within the bounds of our fund balance policy by 2018.
Okay.
This also does not assume any spending on the middle school.
Right,
So
I understand that.
So
It
where-
also does not have all the revenue that we'll get from Target, from a lot of new growth. It's very conservative.
yeah, so
We're doing this very conservatively right
So-
now.
As we should.
I did not have him projected out, but I went back and looked at revenue and put in some aggressive assumptions.
Yeah.
And if I use what I would consider to be aggressive assumptions, it's probably worth $300,000 a year of additional revenue, or 1.5 million change in that last number. That 6 million would become 7.5 million, and I think that's a best case.
Best case, by 2020, we're at 7.5 million.
Which will be above
Yes.
our top.
Above our top,
Above
but
our
not by
maximum.
enough to
No,
account for.
Not above our maximum. Our maximum is at 8, almost 9, it looks like. Isn't that the pink line?
Yeah, the pink line,
The
that top
beige
line is
line?
50% of operating
Yeah.
expenses. The lower line is 25, but I believe our policy says 30.
So,
So this is trying to give you some perspective on how much money we have today and how much money we'll have
So
5 years from
just a
today.
question, if we, that's just a wild assumption, let's say a round number, we use $5 million for the middle school renovation. Does that mean we have 1 million left in 2020?
Yes.
Okay. And that would be below our minimum.
yeah.
Quite below, yes.
Okay.
Conservatively.
And right now we're at 9.57.
So in
At the
reality,
end of this,
I'm sorry, in reality, the minimum in the year 2020 is roughly 4.2. And if we're at, let's say, 6.2, just to round the numbers up, because we're out 5 or 6 years, we have 2 million to spend and still stay within the bounds, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And this does not, again, this is, although what's projected here are somewhat conservative
Right, I understand.
tax revenue projections, it also does not include much of the uncertainty in other funding sources, which could have more significant
And do you
impacts.
assume we max out on the levy every year?
Yes.
Okay.
We spent a lot of time, we're gonna be bringing other assumptions to you, but both Jay and I, through our organizations, are seeing that the predictions for different cost shifts and state funding change every day. I mean, it's really hard to predict, which is why we just went very, very conservative in what we're bringing to you tonight.
But I think ultimately we have to be realistic, because otherwise, we're so conservative, we may run ourselves out of funds to do a renovation that's appropriate.
And all I'm saying is I think this is realistic because although I think the tax revenue is underestimated, I think we've also neglected some significant downsides that are fairly
We don't
certain.
know about yet.
State funding.
Yeah, I think something's going to be done. I don't know when, but they've been talking about this for several years and are just gaining the political momentum to pass something. We don't know what it will look like, but it's almost certain that we will lose money as a result of it because we're a wealthier district.
So if you were to draw the lines out, to 2021 and 22, would we continue to see this trajectory? And does it continue to go down like this?
Yes, given the same salary assumptions.
Keeping in mind though that once you really get out of the 3-year point, your projections are getting less and less accurate.
The further out you go, the less accurate you are. And also, to be fair, every projection that I've seen at a school district looks like this because of the tax cap formula. The way the tax caps work, your revenue grows at a certain rate and your expenses tend to grow at a higher rate. So there are things that you do in the interim to change the course that you're headed on. For example, in 2016, we're going to pass a balanced budget. This says we're going to lose $200,000, but when we review what our expenses are and what our revenues are, we'll likely make reductions in areas that we don't need and balance the budget. Whether you can continue to do that in the future depends on the size of the deficits. And
What would be helpful to me in the future is to see the revenue line and the expense line, because it doesn't, I don't have a feel for what's happening here. I can see the fund balance going down, but I don't know if that's a function of fewer revenues or higher expenses.
right, and
So,
I will say, so I
And we
can.
couldn't do that today
right, I understand. but in
because
the future-
of the information on the collective bargaining agreement that hasn't been released.
But both of those are
He has
growing.
it.
Okay,
It's just that expenses are growing faster than revenue. Because when we levied exactly what we needed for expenses, we're saying those are equal, and then revenue growth is limited by CPI, and the expense growth is whatever we negotiate with contracts or whatever health insurance trends are and things that we don't have as much control over. So you're kind of locked into.
but what we're saying here in the later years is we're overspending $1 million more than we're getting in revenue, because our fund balance is dropping off by $1 million. So we're
Yes.
getting $1 million, we're spending, you're either
Being
spending, we're either spending $1 million more or getting $1 million less, one way or another.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And so there is some. You're going to make adjustments. The further out you get, the less
Okay.
accurate these are, but it's a good data point so that you know what things could look like if you continue to do the same.
Is the revenue stream based on exactly where it is now, no increase in the revenue stream?
The revenue stream is based on, because 90+% of our revenue comes from local property taxes. It's fairly easy to calculate. All you have to assume is what is my CPI and how much new property are we going to get. So what's built in here is the 2 years of CPI that we know, and a 2% CPI going forward after that, which is what the Government Office of Budget
So is
is
that
projecting.
saying 2% increase in home values for assessments?
It really doesn't.
Not necessarily.
It doesn't have anything to do with property value. The way that the taxes work is it's the formula which is based on the Consumer Price Index. And they allow us to extend those taxes to new property as well. So the taxes on existing property go up by the Consumer Price Index. When they build Target, that's brand new property that's never been taxed before. So we basically get to tax them at the same rate as everybody else. And so that's a one-time windfall to our tax revenue. And then every year after that, Target's going to keep paying that amount plus the CPI. So the only way you could ever levy more than the Consumer Price Index is if, as new property comes on to your tax rolls. This year, our new property, which I'll be presenting at the board meeting, we got our final numbers for 2014. We had $2.5 million of new property added to our tax base. And it's not been less than, it's been about $3 million a year. Only 2 years have been less than 3. This last year, 2.5, and then one other year previous to that.
Something just doesn't feel right with me on the numbers here, and maybe we can get into it later, but I see if the revenue line is going up by the CPI every year,
Yes.
then our expenses are going up pretty significantly because we're in a downward trend here, which will end up at 0 at some point.
Correct.
And so our expenses continue to go up, or are projected to go up, but we're not compensating with increased revenue. So at some point,
Right.
Or
we
cap.
can't, so at some point, one would look at expenses.
Right. That's, I think.
Except that 75% of our expenses are
Yeah.
salaries and benefits, and
But-
are pretty fixed.
But if we don't do that, how can we afford a renovation? I mean, if we do a $4 million renovation, we're not gonna have any fund balance based on this formula by the year 2022 or 2023.
And that's why I think we have to have a serious conversation about it now, because once we spend the money, we can't get it back.
I think Jay and I in discussions felt pretty strongly that we're comfortable with 4.5 million. But there's also something to chew on a little bit. We do not have the results back of our life safety study, and there will be many life safety issues from the middle school. And we could actually, and it's just something to think about. We could bond another million or a 1.5 million for life safety, and that gives another option for us.
Do you have to take that to
No.
referendum?
No.
So we have our own
We're
bonding
bonding
capacity?
Yes.
And we're gonna have life safety things, for instance, security cameras,
Mhm.
the vestibule at the middle school. Those are all life safety things that are gonna come up in the report.
If we, this is a very hypothetical kind of conversation. You do not have this chart run with money taken out for the middle school, do you?
No.
No,
No, but it would
Would you
be
expect
the
the
exact
shape?
same line, just however $4 million.
That's what I wanted to ask. So if you drop it down $4.5 million or $5 million and run that same curve down, you zero out in like 2019. I mean,
That's what I would say.
that's what
Not
John
in
said.
2019, but in
Right.
2022, 2021, 22,
I
yeah.
don't know.
21, 22.
But it also means that our expenses are ratcheting up pretty significantly over that period of time. That's why I think we just need to understand the assumptions a little better.
I think the big difference between what you see before, CPI, that going down to 0.8 is gonna have a significant impact on what we're doing. That's one thing I think we need to keep in mind. I think the other thing that Jay and I talked about, there is so much uncertainty in the state that we can project out to, I would say right now we could project out to 18 and be relatively certain what we're doing. But I'm gonna tell you, even in 17, 18, everything's gonna be up for grabs. We're considered a wealthy district. So with all the other cost shifts, what's everybody else gonna do in the state of Illinois? Something's gonna have to be changed. So I do think the middle school, without question, something needs to be done there. It goes back to that original study by Plant Moran. I think they cited 4.5. And if you wanted, if the board felt that after we start hearing some of the suggestions and some of the, we get the report from the life safety, a 1.5 bond, a 1 to 1.5 bonding for the life safety might be a possibility. It's just something to think about.
I think the chart that you saw previously, the assumptions built into that were 2% salary increases for everybody off the board, over the board. And
But we
that's,
can't talk about that right now.
no, well, I'm just saying, that's the same as our revenue assumption. So it was flat because we were assuming lockstep growth.
Yeah. The ideas that we saw the other day, just a month ago or so, what's the range of, I know it's very, very preliminary.
He doesn't have any range.
He
He
doesn't.
can't, no. He needs to kind of have an idea from us
Isn't that
what we're looking at.
Isn't that one of the things we asked them to start to come back and narrow it down and come back
Mhm.
with some dollars
Okay.
at the next time and we're meeting with the architect this
Thursday.
Thursday.
And we're scheduled to have this discussion every meeting from now through the end of June. So, and after the contract is done, we can have a little bit more specific conversations. But we felt like it was important for you to see this. Now, it is different than what we've seen before. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of impact from our levies, as well as the CPI going drastically down.
It'll be easier for me to handle once I see the assumptions and understand what's behind both the revenue and the expense assumptions. I just doesn't really.
And I'll also get a chance to do a lot more of this myself. This was something that we had prepared for us. So I've gone through the numbers and it seems
It's a starting.
to be reasonable, but I want to be able to dig
So
into it.
so reasonable meaning in the ballpark of reality?
Yeah, I wouldn't have presented it if I didn't think it was accurate.
It seems I hope I'm not speaking out of school, but no pun intended, but it seems to be a pretty dark picture considering what we're looking at.
And it doesn't make sense to me that we were on this upward trajectory, that, explosive growth in the budget, and then between 2013 and 14 it plummets. We know why it went down, but now that we're in sort of what looks to be almost like a death spiral
But
downward.
if you go back
So
to where we did the bonds, the last bond work that we did, those were the projections, that we would start
For this year,
plateauing out and going down a little bit like that.
not
So
like this though.
Not
Right, not like this, where it continues now
Right.
by $1 million every year. But
But
to
it's
James'
sort of-
point, I think I heard him saying, I didn't fully understand it, but that, we will make changes in the budget to address that, although
Right.
one wonders what we would cut from the budget. Nothing jumps to mind.
that too.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I guess more to come on this, but I think it's helpful to start at least moderating our expectations with regard to what the renovation's going to look
Just
like.
off the top of my head, between 2016 and 2020, it's 4 years, we're going to drop $4 million in reserve, fund balance reserve, and either that's increased expense or it's decreased revenue. I don't know what it is right now. You probably have a rough feeling for it, but I think we just need to understand a little better what that is. Because if we're going to make a decision to spend $4.5 million today,
we're not making that decision today.
no, I said if we're going to make that decision, then we're going to make it within the next 12 months.
Right.
Or shorter than that, we need to know how that's going to impact the future fund balance.
I think we probably need to learn more about that bonding of the life safety side idea that you guys are presenting as well. And we need to learn more details about how that works and the impact
And more
on
about the big picture. There are supporting documents for all this, John, but again, we're not comfortable bringing that into a public meeting at this point until the contract's voted on, so.
Okay.
Any other questions? So what do you need from us? The supporting documents, more
I would like-
information on life safety,
And the assumptions behind the revenue and expense projections.
and you have that on.
Yeah, it's all the same.
And if we're gonna have discussion on it in a meeting, I would appreciate having it ahead of time. I can't, if I this form is relatively simple, but I can't digest a whole lot of it while I'm listening to discussion. I would need a little bit of time to prep
I
ahead.
agree.
So we'll get you some documents. Actually, we gotta be careful on that too, because we're not voting on the contract till the next meeting. We'll figure out timing.
The only other thing from my perspective that would be interesting is the variance between the last document we saw, this chart, and this one. What happened and what are the assumptions behind the differences? That would be good for me to understand.
We will get that rolling.
Okay.
All right, moving right along.
Questions? Everybody good on the middle school update? All right, so Dr. Sophie's going to talk to us about field trips, IMC.
We are bringing our usual suspects for our field trip approvals. Our board policies is very specific that the board has to approve any overnight trips or trips outside of the state. So the 4 field trips that qualify for that are the 5th grade outdoor ed at Atwood and Rockford, the 6th grade Springfield trip, the 7th grade outdoor ed trip in East Troy, Wisconsin, and the 8th grade Washington, D.C. field trip. So on the sheet and behind that are some supporting documents. I think it's important for you as board members to look at the cost per student. Many of our field trips are always based on number of participants, because the more participants we have, the lower the cost per student. And so at the end of the month, we'll be asking you to approve these 4 trips. And I'm here to answer any questions you have. Nate will obviously be here at the end of the month to answer questions.
I just had one. What's the cost to the district after the contribution by the students?
These trips, I think, are fairly cost neutral. The only expense to the district is for kids who are going on waiver, who are qualified for
Fee reduced.
Okay, so we pay the cost of attendance for them. So it'd be the number of kids times the cost per student.
Because it is a field trip, we are responsible for paying for it for free and reduced children. So,
And the cost of the stipends for the staff, for the chaperones and things like that.
And our population is typically 10%, around 10% free and reduced.
Yes.
So you can figure, okay. So in a class of 100 kids, there might be 10 that we pay for, as a.
I think the other thing that I would just share is Nate has quite a few resources where people donate money to for the Washington, D.C. trip. So oftentimes the district doesn't have to pick up the whole cost of that trip. He has many various sources of people that contribute money for kids to go on that trip. So.
Obviously, the 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C. is the most costly of them. How often do we explore different providers and do quality control to make sure that this is money that's well spent and this is the best itinerary we can get? I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of this particular itinerary. I've expressed that before. But it's an expensive one, and I know we've used Hemisphere for years. Maybe that's because it's the best thing going, but have we?
It's the best one as far as safety for kids. They're very good about helping us set up things like the escorts at night at the hotels so that our teachers can sleep. There are actually people that are in the hallways awake all night, making sure nobody comes out of their room. Hemisphere has worked very closely with Nate as far as planning. They're pretty good about making changes. And I know that only because of my first year here, we had to cancel the Washington, D.C. trip because of Hurricane Sandy. And they were really good with Nate as far as rescheduling some events and not being able to reschedule events. So, and I know from my experience with these, there's not a whole lot of companies that do this. There's like 2 or 3. And we used Hemisphere for all of ours too, because they work best with us and kind of have the relationship with all the different places we go on. We actually go see on the trip.
Okay.
That's
I mean, I want to be
my
sure we're not just on autopilot with this, and I don't know what discretion, if any, we have. I would imagine they probably set the itinerary, and this is just what you get.
Actually, there is some discretion on that. Nate works with them. They make sure that the places the kids go to are aligned with the curriculum that they're talking about. it varies sometimes on where there are times of the year they can't get in certain places. So they have to make up and go somewhere else for that time period. But in general, they're pretty flexible and work with Nate on that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
certainly if there was something that parents said, this is a total waste of time, or if the teachers found that something was a total waste of time, they'd look for another
I'm
event.
thinking of the feedback I've gotten from kids, and it's a small sample, I'll be candid, but feeling that some of it was a waste, not a waste of time, but wasn't what they most wanted to see on a trip to DC, like the museum as opposed to being in the Capitol. And I know as a parent, the trip to DC is all about governance and being in the Capitol. So that's the kind of thing that I've heard before.
Who establishes, I lived in DC for 25 years, I agree with you, looking at this spending time at the Iwo Jima Memorial, which doesn't
Right,
require
or the
much, it's
Korean
just- it's in
Memorial,
front
or
of
the
airport.
Albert Einstein,
Yeah.
yes, the Holocaust
Who
Museum.
sets this agenda? Is it the hemisphere
The
or
company plus Nate.
plus Nate? Yeah, I mean, I drove by it every day on the way to the airport, but then it's never stopped.
Right.
So Smithsonian Museums, I could spend 3 days there, going through the aerospace and through the natural history. But anyway.
I mean, from my understanding of the curriculum that they were studying at the time, it was focused on American governance and history, and the itinerary doesn't seem to align with that all that well.
Yeah.
Nor does it, in my opinion, capture what really is the essence and the best of DC.
Go to the House of
There's-
Congress, go to the Supreme Court, there's plenty of
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah,
government things to do.
according-
Some places will not take large groups of kids though.
Okay.
So I think, now obviously the Capitol does,
Mhm.
but I'll share it with Nate and get a little bit more information so we can address that with you. Because he will have all the answers for us. at the end of
Okay,
the month.
good.
Any other comments, concerns, or questions?
Moving right along
Right.
to item D, kiddos food service vendor.
Okay, there was a memo in your packet. Basically, we're looking at implementing a everyday hot lunch program at the elementary school. Currently, the PTO provides lunch on Fridays, and there's a opportunity to partner with this local company. I've actually had personal experience with this company at my son's school, and we've been very happy with it. My son likes the lunches, and my wife loves the interface. It's very easy to pay for them. We started 1 day a week thinking we were going to make lunches the rest of the days of the week, and then we slowly got lazy, and we end up now we're just a 5 day a week family. And so we've got basically put all the information out there. There's a brief 2-minute video that kind of explains the program that we'll show you, and then Michelle from Kiddos is here, and she can answer any questions you have. Or if you have any questions before we start.
How local is local?
We're not planning on changing that.
Like, sure.
We do right now, and our parents.
You want a great lunch program for your school camp. We get that. We see it every day. Parents really want a break from packing lunches. Families and school administrators want great food for lunch that they know the kids will eat. We get that too. If kids don't like their lunch, whether it's from home or otherwise, they won't eat it, and that can make it hard to concentrate for the rest of the day. Searching for food providers, finding the people to put together a lunch program and manage it can be a daunting task. So how do you do it? And where do you start? Meet Kiddos. Kiddos will coordinate, administer, and manage your complete lunch program. Kiddos is the way to ensure your kids will love their lunch. We created a network of restaurants that are located in and around your area by first testing them out ourselves. Our locally sourced restaurants use fresh, natural ingredients every day when preparing lunches. Every delicious lunch comes with Kiddos fresh cut fruit or a variety of other sides. And kids get excited about eating their Kiddos lunches because they're from restaurants they know and love. So how does a Kiddos program work? Kiddos lunch programs are easy for everyone. Online ordering is flexible and convenient, and I can order for any date that I'd like. That's right, all it takes is a few clicks of the mouse and you're all set. A different restaurant and menu is offered every day. There's something for everyone to order on a Kiddos lunch menu. Kiddos provides a variety of lists and reports so schools and PTOs can follow the progress of the lunch program. All of Kiddos' lunches are labeled, which makes distributing lunches quick and easy. Our dedicated delivery expediters pick up the lunches at the restaurant every day, and they carefully check to make sure everything is right with the order. We also offer on-site lunch supervisors. They organize and distribute the lunches so the kids have everything they need. Making sure kids are loving and eating their lunches is why we allow families to change, cancel, or add to their lunch orders. Kiddos handles all customer service for you in a fast, friendly, and helpful manner. The price is right too, because there's no cost for a Kiddos lunch program, other than the cost of each lunch. If it's fundraising you want, Kiddos will give a portion of the sale of each lunch back to your organization based on your fundraising goals. We're the leaders in restaurant-based school and camp lunch programs, serving over 5,000 lunches a week and growing every day. In other words, we're not going anywhere. So contact us today because at Kiddos, we get lunch. Let us get lunch for you.
Are board members eligible?
So I know the PTO has, we would probably use local restaurants like Bluffington's and Kenny's Graffiti Grill and some other places. Kiddos will work with those vendors, and if they meet their standards and are able to fulfill the needs of the program, then they would be the local vendors, the same ones that we're currently using to provide food that the kids are.
Do those vendors approach Kiddos? Because I had a community member approach me asking how a particular provider in the neighborhood could become part of a program. Do they approach Kiddos and say we can do that?
Yeah.
You know, if you could step up to the microphone.
So yeah, the point of the program is to make everybody happy. Kids, parents, school administrators, and local businesses. So whenever possible, we want to use the businesses in and around your area. Restaurants contact us, we contact restaurants. If a school is already working with particular restaurants that can work within our framework, we're happy to keep them in the school, and we want to do that. If at all possible, if the kids are enjoying the lunches already, we want to keep that restaurant as one of our restaurants. But at the end of the day, obviously, we're a business, and we need to make sure that whoever we are doing business with is someone we can do business with, that is reliable, that we can put our name behind, because it's ultimately our reputation that's at stake. We take responsibility for any issues that come up with, a restaurant, messing up an order, or, losing a lunch, or whatever it is. It all falls on Kiddos. So we just want to make sure that the restaurants we use are people we're comfortable working with. And there's never usually been an issue. And if there is, we'll switch them out and work with somebody else. So,
One of the questions that one of the parents had was, if it's a hot meal, for instance, how does it stay hot between the restaurant and then us getting the food to the children?
right. So there's a number of different ways to do that, and it really does depend on your individual lunch schedule. So I have met with the PTO. If I recall correctly, you have a number of different lunch periods. Right. So we would coordinate deliveries accordingly. They've talked to us also about having the on-site supervisor at the school, which we have some schools that use that service. We wouldn't be charging anything extra to use the service. It's really a benefit for us to make sure our lunches are reaching the right people, because people are paying us for them. But ultimately, we would do whatever it takes. There's some schools we put warmers in if that will accommodate the problem or situation, or make sure the lunches are warmer.
See, the problem we have is there really, especially at the elementary school, there's not a whole lot of room for warmers. That's why it came up, and we all wondered if you would deliver for each lunch then.
Well, we would deliver as many times as necessary to make sure that the lunches stay warm. So for instance, we have Kiddos hot bags that we use for all our deliveries. If we have a school, for instance, that has 2 lunch periods that are 20 minutes apart, similar to where Jay's kids are going to school, we make 1 delivery, and the lunches stay plenty warm. They are left in the bags before they're served. If there's more than that amount of time, then absolutely we have to do more than 1 delivery, and we do. So it's just a matter of the timing. Whatever we need to do to work it out, if we have to do 4 deliveries, then we do 4 deliveries. If that makes the most sense, then we do it. If you don't have room for, like a warming cabinet that's like this size, for us to put in and is on wheels that we could wheel into a closet or just off to the side or whatever, just depending on the school, then we'll do as many deliveries as we need to and work with the vendors to do that. We don't want to serve cold food. But I will say this, once the lunches are out of the bags and on the table and waiting for the kids to come into the lunchroom, they're all gonna, nothing's gonna be piping hot. So it's like I always say, it's like pizza delivery at your house. By the time the pizza gets to you, you know it's in the warming bags and whatever, and if you sit it on the counter, by the time everyone gets to the table, that's how our lunches are served, basically.
And you can serve cold lunches too, that's okay. Good
Yeah.
sandwich, that's fine too. This sounds like a great program. Where were you 9 years ago?
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Now, I know, I'm thinking about a child that I had in my last district that had severe diabetes. I'm sure you have all the menus available so parents can count out whatever they need to count out for that
For
particular.
the carbohydrates
Yes.
and all of that, yes. So, a lot of times the nurses will ask us for that information. The vendors we're working with, they're mostly mom and pop stores, so they don't have like the Subway nutritional information. And we can only, get as close as we can, but it seems to be good enough. Everything that, every vendor we use, we're asking them to make everything from scratch in-house. We don't like frozen products, everything's got to be made fresh and it's got to be made fresh that day. So, if they're using, the only thing that they would use that would be frozen would probably be a chicken tender. So that information's on the ingredient box. And then you've got, your whole fruits and vegetables. They have the ingredients for everything in the recipes for whatever they're serving. So, when it comes to that and allergies, we always tell parents, here, we give them the restaurant information, contact the restaurant directly. We don't know what your child's individual needs are. It's always best to get that information directly from the restaurant, and then it's an optional program. So, buyer beware, do what makes the most sense for your family. But I will tell you this, we try to make sure that our programs are the most inclusive and that we're not disenfranchising anybody from the program. There's a lot of programs that we've taken over that, were so far on the range of healthy food that you had kids that just wouldn't eat the food, and then
Right.
whole families that couldn't order because their kids simply wouldn't eat it, and maybe they're eating healthy every other meal of their life, but they just want to make sure they're eating lunch when they're at school so they can focus for the rest
Right.
of the day. And we do everything we can to make sure that the lunches are as healthful as possible, but they're good, and we want to make sure the kids are going to eat them, but they're not horrible for them. There's fresh fruit sides that we make sure we pair with things. We make sure that the chicken is hormone and antibiotic free. We do as much as we can so that everybody can order the food. There's healthy options, there's gluten-free options, there's vegetarian options. So for people who are hyper concerned about healthy lunches, they can order those. They're not going to be organic, but they'll be healthy. And then people who just want their kids to eat and be happy and order hot dogs and chicken tenders every day, they could do that too if they want. But there's something for everybody on our menus, I would say.
Do you have a registered dietitian or nutritionist on staff?
I do not. We have a registered dietitian we have worked with in the past who's looked at our menus. But I would never hold my company out there to be like a Arbor or a Sodexo or even a Quest. That's just not what we do. We're more about providing plain old food that kids know, love, will eat, parents will order, that come from restaurants that you go to with your families that are in your neighborhood and that are in your area. And we say to parents, there are 5 meals a day that you are not there to control what goes into your child's mouth. Let us give them what they want within reason so they'll eat. And all the other meals during the course of the week, you can focus on organic and fresh vegetables and all of those things because, that's just not what we do. We just are a lunch management company. So.
And that's the hard part. We brought in a lunch program in my last district according to national lunch guidelines. And I will share with you the amount of wasted food was devastating to me. And it's not like you can pack it up and send it home with the kids for their families to eat.
Well-
So I think a balance, I think, is really important.
And in addition to that, we can't work with schools that participate in the NSLP. First of all, I'm not going to serve a half of a cup of pasta as a portion or a 2-ounce burger. I can't do that, nor will my restaurants do that. So it's really just food that we all know and enjoy from in and around our area that, we're allowing the kids to eat. And in fact, the kids have it so good with these restaurant lunches that now we have an offshoot and we're going to start offering kiddos lunches to corporations, like people who are at work who can't get away from their desk. Now they can get, Mondays is this, Tuesdays is that.
It's not bad.
In order, like regular, grown-up lunches.
Just include John on your.
Yeah, the kids don't get all the fun, so we thought, grown-ups should be able to order these.
So now if you can't service okay, you've got park districts and school districts and parochial schools in Deerfield, Wilmette, Winnetka, Gurney, and Palatine.
And Evanston as well.
So those are some of the comparables. Which school do you service in Palatine?
We don't, it's the Park District of Palatine.
Okay.
Yeah, Palatine Park District, we do their camps.
Oh,
And
okay.
we do the Wilmette Park District camps, which was kind of what started this whole ball rolling. This is our 6th summer with the Wilmette Park District camp. It's a really popular program.
So I see on your letter, it says there's no charge for the program outside the cost of the lunches, so the district doesn't absorb any additional cost. But is there administrative commitment or time required on behalf of the district?
There really isn't. It depends how you guys decide to structure it. Many of the schools we work with, we work through the PTO. There's really not much for anybody to do in terms of administrative on your end. We do ask, we'll provide you with a flyer prior to ordering opening because we don't have access to all of the district emails and information so that we can dispense information to parents. We only have information for people who have actually registered on our site and have opted in to receive email, who have given us email permission. So we look to the PTO or the administration to do, send out e-blasts for us, with reminders, maybe a handful of times a year. The other thing that we do, if we have an on-site supervisor, other than that, we really don't look to the administration to do anything.
I think the only thing that we would need to do in our district, which we've talked about, is we have a few families who don't really have access to internet. And so we would work with the teachers, we know who those families are, and maybe print out menus for them and have a teacher check in with them once a month. That's really administratively about all we would need to do because PTO would be working with us on this. This would be their fundraiser.
And in terms of cost,
So this is a fundraiser. And I just want to raise the issue that the food that we're talking about sounds like it's probably relatively high in fat and sodium and probably not really all that healthful if we're talking about chicken nuggets and hot dogs and pizza.
Not really.
And
go ahead.
And I see an ethical issue doing fundraising, serving kids junk food. I have a problem with that.
Okay, can I just take issue with that for a second? I don't consider anything that kiddos provides junk food. We don't work with McDonald's and fast food chains and things like that. We're working with restaurants who are, I don't know about you, but they're using fresh ingredients, homemade pasta sauces. We're doing pastas. We work with lots of different restaurants. It's not just, we have usually a grill day a week, and on that grill day, there's usually salads and wraps and all sorts of different things that people can.
Okay, because the food you mentioned so far was pizza and hamburgers and chicken nuggets.
Yeah, I think I mentioned chicken nuggets just as our only fast food, our only frozen item that.
So what are some other examples of some other meals that you've got?
We do everything from, sandwiches to wraps. I don't know. I think everybody has a difference of opinion when it comes to what is
Healthful.
healthy food. To me, healthy food is wholesome food, whole food that is not processed. We don't do anything like that. We offer fresh cut fruit every day that does not come from a store shelf. It's cut fresh at the vendors. You can get, like I said, salads, wraps. We work with Potbelly, Jimmy John's, for fresh sandwiches, Once Upon a Bagel. It just depends. It depends on the restaurants that are around us. But I really really do take issue with the whole, junk food. It's not junk food. There's definitely junk food on the menu because it's not my place to tell another family what's best for them. I don't want to disenfranchise anybody from the program. Anybody who has the same beliefs that I do in healthful eating, and people who don't. It's really, I'm in the business to sell lunches to as many people as possible and make sure there's something on the menu for as many people as possible. So I'm not going to work with a restaurant that's using frozen products and things out of a can and things like that. So it's all fresh ingredients and it's all made fresh that day, and there's lots to order for whatever your taste and whatever you're looking for.
So how does the fundraising part exactly work?
So we sell the lunches for a certain price. Let's say we sell lunch for $4.75. The PTO wants to make money on the program, then they can add whatever they want basically to that price. So we could, if they don't want to, we could just get on, put the price online. Parents pay $4.75. They get one entree and two sides. Each entree includes two sides. If they want to make money, then they say, oh, we want to make 50 cents a lunch or 25 cents a lunch or whatever it is. And then we add that to the $4.75. Let's say they want to make 50 cents a lunch. Now the lunch cost is $5.25. So parents get on to order, they pay $5.25. 50 cents is given back to the PTO at the end of each lunch session.
And I think my understanding, to fill in some of the blanks, is that I know they already do food day one day a week at the elementary
Right.
school.
Well, that's sort of what they do for food day. Is they organize it and they go out and buy lunches for $3 a lunch, and then they sell them to families at $4 a lunch, and that's where they're making their money. So here they would instead be
Outsource it.
basically outsourcing it,
That's really what they're kind of doing.
providing the labor, and volunteering at the school to pass out lunches or help out with the program, and that volunteer time is what is earning them the additional money. So
That makes sense.
it could be that we pay kiddos an additional 25 or 50 cents a lunch to provide people to pass out lunches. If our PTO instead wants to do it, they can do that instead, and we'd have a period of overlap where they would get trained on how to do it or whatever that looks like. But then in return for their volunteering in the lunchroom, they would earn that extra 25 or 50 cents a lunch, and that would be their fundraiser. So instead of spending the time sending out order forms and collecting them and finding the vendors and managing the food and doing all that stuff, which they're not really trained to do, or they would be being parents in the lunchroom and passing out food to kids and helping kids in the lunchroom and things like that is the way to raise money.
So is that the plan, that the lunchroom would then be staffed every day with members of the PTO?
We're still talking with the PTO about that. I don't know how much money they currently make from their food program and what gap we're filling. It may be that they volunteer a couple days a week and kiddos provides labor the other days of that week, and that the lunch price is consistent for the entire time, but that we're paying kiddos to do it, or we're paying the PTO to do it in essence on different days.
But I thought I heard that there was no additional fee by kiddos to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would not charge you an additional fee to have an on-site supervisor at the school.
Okay.
It does seem odd to me that the PTO sort of has this excise tax on this program to raise money.
I think if I remember, and Jay, I'm really reaching to the depths of my memory, that we had said that they would be offering one supervisor, and we didn't think that was enough to get all the lunches out and give the kids the most amount of time to eat.
Yeah.
And that's what we were looking for PTO for support on.
Having more people that are passing out lunches is better, and if we have a kiddo's staff member who's coordinating it and helping to herd the PTO parents and direct them, I think the lunch program will go a lot more smoothly that way.
One of the other options we could always do is, which we had talked about, is having kiddos 4 days a week and having PTO keep their food day on Fridays. We just thought it would be easier for parents to have, right.
I guess I'd like to understand, first of all, what role the board plays in all of this. What is, are we being asked to approve something, or is
You're
there
going to have
something
to
that we need
approve the
do?
food service program, yes.
Is it a contract that's signed with the vendor? How does, what do we?
No, in fact, that's one of the nice things about having the PTO involved is that if we, well, one, they sell directly to the parents, so really it's kind of outsourced, and we're allowing them to come in and sell to our parents.
And
We
what
are-
the PTO is doing is providing the labor to make the machine work, right?
Right.
I mean,
You know, they've
That's what I
already done a lot of work
understand.
with our current vendors. They would be
helping
They'd
with
still be
lunch.
helping in the lunchroom. I talked to the woman who does it now, and she wanted to put in recycling, composting containers and things, and like make it into an educational program, and they'd be involved in it in some way. I think what I didn't want to do was to say, and I mean, being the district we can, but I didn't want to come in and say, PTO, I know that you raise all this money on your Friday food day, and we're doing something else, so you can't do that anymore, and then have them have a hole where they're not raising money anymore, and really that money flows back to the district anyway, so it's not.
And it flows back to the district in some specific things, right? Like paying for copiers and office supplies or something. That was my understanding, that there was a certain amount that the PTO raised every year to pay for some of those big. No, that's not the
I
case.
don't think that's the idea. I mean, they donate money to the school for various
Cultural
purposes.
events, assemblies.
Being a parent organization of the school, we allow them to use our copiers and things like that.
They might have donated equipment in the past, though. I don't know.
I mean, the program itself sounds great. It sounds great to me, and I remember being a parent who had to pack the lunch, and this would be a welcome alternative. So I'm in favor of that. What I'd like is a better understanding of what the PTO's role is going to be and how it's going to be priced.
Right. Well, and I think we're still discussing that.
Yeah.
We are going to be providing lunches to the free and reduced, to the free lunch, kids who qualify for free lunch based on federal guidelines. So we would still need to pay for those lunches, and the cost will be comparable to what we're paying today, but chances are that the total amount of money would be high enough that we would have to bid it as a school district if we were buying it directly from kiddos. And so if the PTO is providing these lunches and we're just reimbursing the PTO, that helps to avoid a lot of the headaches in that area. So that's another reason why it's nice to have PTOs involved.
Because to my knowledge, there are not any other vendors that are comparable with this.
No, I mean, and that's another,
So-
we'd have to talk to figure out how we would even bid something like that. But if it was a request, we'd have to do an intergovernmental agreement because they're already in another district. But bidding food service is a significant undertaking.
Yes, it is.
I've done it before.
Can I also just say, just in terms of how we work with other PTOs and their role, even when we do have an on-site supervisor, they do still have a very big role in the lunch program. They are the reason why we aren't using staff resources at the school, because we're using PTO resources, and they are our contact person. They're the ones that are coordinating everything with us. So, it's all set up through them. If we do need people in the lunchroom, we always, we can always use volunteers in the lunchroom. Our one person can really distribute our lunches. We do it at a number of different schools, but it's always nice to have volunteers in the lunchroom, especially if they want to be there, also helping. We have a number of schools who have taken on this environmental project because there is waste when it comes to, all of our stuff is recyclable, but there are programs in place where they're teaching the kids how to recycle and compost, and the environmental committee on the PTO is the one that's heading it up, and oftentimes that's the person that's in the lunchroom showing the kids how to do it. I just saw it last week at one of our schools. It's amazing. I'm asking, where does this go? There's 5 different little garbage cans, the food goes here, that goes there, and they know. So the PTO does a lot to help assist in a kiddo's lunch program, but not like the labor the intense labor that's involved in them doing it themselves, because it really is. And they can only do it once a week. They don't have the volunteer resources to do it more than once a week, but they want to be able to provide parents with the ability to order lunch more than once a week. So this to them was a very, a happy medium. So however you guys decide to work it out, in terms of costs and who gets what money or whatever.
And Leanne, I don't know if that answers your question at all on the fundraising piece, because they're currently doing fundraising the Fridays. That's my understanding.
That's
For
correct.
the food days.
Mhm.
So it extends their fundraiser Monday through Friday.
And the
Yeah,
choices
I don't
offered.
see an issue with that. I just raised the question about the quality of the food that we're,
Well, I want to ask you a
Selling
question
to
that
it.
might help address that. When, if I was a parent, am I going to see multiple choices at each meal
Yes.
that potentially span the spectrum of what different people consider healthful?
Exactly. So,
So you're not just limited to
no.
cheeseburgers on Tuesdays?
No. Right. So but that's kind of how it is now. They're lunch
Right.
programs like that now. You have
It is.
one or two choices.
Yeah.
You know, there's at least 4 to 8 or more choices
Per
every
day?
day.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other nice thing is the ability to order online and change and cancel your order. So if you do order something and your child does not like it, you're not locked in for this whole length of time that you bought lunch for, and just too bad. As long as you get on and change your order the Monday prior to the week, that we're serving, you can add, cancel, change. There's just a lot of flexibility. So parents are more inclined to order. It makes it easier, more comfortable for them to do so.
So no longer, I don't think we do this anymore anyway. When the beginning of the school day starts, we're not taking lunch orders at elementary. Middle we are, I think,
yes.
but
Yes.
elementary we're not.
Right. We're not spending, so currently we have somebody who drives over to, one of our custodians drives over to Lake Forest School to pick up the lunches for the kids who qualify for free lunch, so that will go away. The kids who do qualify for free lunch will get the same lunch as everybody else delivered in the same manner, so
Which is much better.
nobody will know who is paying and who is not. And then we will be saving on, as she said, if we get some PTO help, there's really very little administrative work for us to do on this end.
This is a middle school program too?
Only elementary.
It's only
right now for
elementary,
us.
right? I think this would work in the middle school. They have a program that is working for them currently, and Nate
Yeah.
was going to shoot me if I changed one more thing on him this year. So.
Well, you know what?
See how
Test
people
it.
love it.
Yeah, and that's kind of
That's
that's,
a
true
that was
statement.
part of the reason for it. I thought, this would be perfect for the elementary school. There's nothing there. If it works well and everybody likes it,
Talk later.
then it's
Bring it
easier
up.
to transition something to the middle school than to start with something brand new that's been untested.
And middle school kids tend to be pickier with what they eat anyway, I think.
But there are also options for middle school kids where you can get bigger meals, so you can order a larger portion if there's not enough food for an 8th grader at a different price.
So, and to answer Julie's question, we'll be asking you just to approve hiring kiddos. It really will go through PTO, but as a board, we still need to get approval to even bring it in our buildings.
Okay, sounds good.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to item E, which is Vision 2020.
I am going to cut back on this a little bit because we still have to go through summer things. If you grab your pamphlet that's on your side, each of you should have that. I want to just generally present a couple things to you. And maybe, Terry, since we're not doing the video, if you could move to the next handout that I had in there. All right, what do you have next? Actually, go back to the last one. No, it's going forward. I'll just go ahead and start. The bottom line with Vision 2020, and we're a little bit behind on this right now. As you know, as from being a board member, in 2012, the IASA, which is the Superintendent's Professional Organization, initiated a visioning process, and included in that process was the Illinois Principals Association, the Illinois Association of School Business Officials, the Illinois Association of School Boards, and the Superintendent's Commission for the Study of Demographics, and the Illinois Association of Regional Superintendents. And what they came up with is on your pamphlet. They came out with 4 different, what they call pillars. And really, I summarize this in saying everyone was kind of tired. All our organizations were very tired of all these legislators keep just keep throwing changes to us. And instead they decided that all of us should be more proactive, so that we had something in place prior to Governor Rauner starting, or whichever governor was going to be elected, so that we could start educating our legislators about what we as school districts feel. And so if you look at your little handout, there were 4 areas, the first one being highly effective educators. And I'm going to get into that just for a couple minutes. The big thing with this one, and we've actually experienced it here, Illinois legislators wound up really narrowing down and taking away licensure I can't pronounce it tonight, reciprocity. And what that means, for instance, we had one of our new teachers here this year went to school in, I believe it was Indiana. And now mind you, paid taxes in Illinois, her parents did, her whole time. She went to school in Indiana, came back here, and now that Illinois didn't have this reciprocity, it was literally a nightmare, and it took us months to get her certified in the state of Illinois. And we all thought, well, why are you doing that, especially in a hard-to-fill area? You're making it harder for us and not easier. So we're asking to expand the licensure reciprocity. We're asking to expand alternative teaching licensure. Oftentimes, and some of the best teachers I've hired have been career changers that were in the business world and came back. And so their educational program could be a little bit different than what a new teacher goes through. Providing teachers student loan forgiveness, because a lot of people are not going into teaching. They get all these student loans and then they don't think they can ever pay back the loans. Establishing partnerships with our colleges to establish consistent admission standards. Funding mentoring for new educators. Expanding education, collaborative opportunities. The big one on here, which we talk about often, is providing sufficient time for collaboration during educators' workdays. And then enhancing the ROE's ability to function as kind of a center for our professional learning. So that's the highly effective educators. And we all of our organizations united around that, including the Illinois School Board Association. Then we move into 21st century learning. We all acknowledge that for success in life, students need to know more than math and reading. So we need to make sure that we work on the social emotional standards. We need to make sure we support student creativity and innovation. We need to promote individualized learning, engage our families, offer incentives for expanding preschool and kindergarten, promoting partnerships with universities, encouraging career exploration, providing high-speed internet, and then incorporating technology in our standards. So that's something we all kind of united around 21st century learning. Again, this was not just done and pulled from the air. All of our organizations actually surveyed people in the groups, and these were the common themes that came from those groups. Shared accountability. This one is a big one because right now they are petitioning, and I have friends that are really working with legislators in this area, telling the legislator that current educators need to be represented on the Illinois State Board of Ed. Right now, there are no current educators on the Illinois State Board of Ed. That makes a lot of our rules. This differentiated accountability model, we somewhat do that already in our district, because what that does, it gives credit to our district for programs and achievements outside of what's normally used to assess schools. So like Kevin has already talked to all of you, we already do STAR and we already do MAP. So then we have to do PARC on top of that. Why can't districts come up with their own accountability systems for what works for them? Distinguish, I love this one, between essential and discretionary regulations, with essential being those that are fully funded, that's a nice one, or federal and having to do something with student safety or civil rights. And then one that's been big in Lake County is allowing districts that give up state funding to opt out of state mandates. So this shared accountability pillar is really critical. And then finally, the equitable and adequate funding. There's a lot of case studies, and John, I actually thought of you when we go to the website. Very interesting case studies on funding from different states. And what we came up with in Illinois is equitable and adequate funding, basically adopting some kind of evidence-based funding model, of which are detailed on their website, enhancing state spending through stability of state funding, pursuing efficiencies at the local level, and we do a lot of discussions with that with our park district and our village, restructuring state revenues to match the 21st century economy, and then creating a 2-year funding cycle with year-ahead budgeting. I cannot share with you how many districts across the state depend on state funding and their funds are drawn in the middle of the year when they've already spent them. And that is a critical problem that we've got. So the bottom line, and Terry, somewhere in there, that I think that's the next slide we talked about, if you move to that one, this one. What's happening then at this particular point is many different laws are starting to come about based upon this model. And if you scroll to the next one, it might be on that one, but we already have laws coming out that legislators are going to, don't worry about it right now. You can get to the website if you want to for me while I'm talking. There's already some legislation about education reciprocity. There's already 3 different bills, and one of our superintendents in Lake County is leading the differentiated and shared accountability, which really is something that I think all of you stand strongly behind. We talk a lot about why do we have to do all this state testing when our testing programs are already working here. Unfunded mandate relief, that's already been in the legislation. There's several different things that are coming out as far as equitable and adequate funding. So when you get to the website, specifically, they talk about how many districts have supported resolutions to support Vision 2020. And at this particular time, which when we get onto the website, in fact, I don't even remember what it was on. It's actually in the news. Go to Toolkit or Press. Go to Toolkit. And if you go to the newsletter, that's where it is, right there. Yep. The big part here, and if you scroll down to the bottom, they update this on a weekly basis. Right now, they have 457 school districts across the state that have voted and approved on resolutions to support Vision 2020. And in essence, what you're doing is saying, hey, we support the concepts in this. And that gives our legislators a lot more support and momentum as they're starting to look into different bills to support this. I think it's really, really important that our district joins almost all the districts in Lake County have supported it. That we pass our resolution to support this too, as all of our organizations are behind it. Lots of reading on the website. If you go onto the Illinois Vision 2020 website, specifically the funding models are on that I think are very interesting. Lots of background information and policy discussions on it. I am giving you just the bare bones today because of time purposes. Does anybody have any questions? I would like to bring the resolution to you next meeting.
How many school districts are there?
862.
862?
I will-
And this is the first I've heard about this, so.
Well, and there's not much when you Google it. There's some content, but not a lot of point counterpoint. I didn't, and I did a quick search, but I didn't find a lot of deep analysis of this. Certainly on the surface of it, there's a lot to like in this initiative. But the devil is in the details of some of these things, and that would be my concern. I looked for the school district. I looked, and I didn't see many that are our comparables, what we've designated as our comparables that had signed on to it. Now,
Most of Lake County has. Most of
Really?
Lake
I
County.
didn't see Highland Park. I didn't see Lake Forest. I didn't see.
Lake Forest, I don't think has even brought. They're like
Right.
us. They haven't even brought it to the board. This is it.
Yeah.
And it has been in all your school board newsletters that you got monthly from the IASB, and it's in there usually monthly. There's a lot on it. So I'm guilty because I have not brought it to you because we've had too many other major things to work on. So we're behind a little bit on this. I do think that I'm going to share with you everything they've done. All the work that they've done is all on their website. So you're not going to find huge amounts of in-depth analysis except for the 2 policy briefs on the funding, educational funding. When you go into that, there's 2 very large studies that have been done that I think are very interesting.
I would bet that they are. I mean, that's the one, frankly, of the 4 canons that would concern me most, being, as we pointed out earlier today, that we are one of the wealthier districts, and when you talk about equitable, inadequate funding, what does that mean for us? Maybe we like it, and maybe we don't. I don't know. But, you know, I'm glad you brought it to us. I think it's very interesting. But I'd like to think more. I'd be interested in some more conversation, because it seems to me, again, that, you know, certain bills for certain concepts might be great, and certain bills for other concepts may be very detrimental. And do we want to sort of hand over that kind of blank check endorsement for this?
And that's really a board decision.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think as most of my colleagues are approaching it, do you believe in the general concepts?
Mm-hmm.
Because the bills are all going to be broken out individually.
Right.
So, and I that is how all of our professional associations are presenting it also. Do you believe in the basic concepts? Basically,
the basic concepts.
the all the things that I read from you that are actually on the website, that's their main tenets. These 2 color pages that you had in your packets, those are the main tenets.
Do you have any concerns with it? When you've read through the things that you're not entirely comfortable with?
There really is nothing that I'm uncomfortable with. I will tell you, my only concern has been exactly what Julie said, is giving a blanket approval to something that we don't know what all the ramifications are going to be. On the other hand, that's why I've asked a lot of questions. Jay's heard a lot in his professional organization. Kevin had a whole session in his professional organization. All of our organizations have spent a lot of work on this, and all of the tenets that they've talked about are things that we have all struggled with.
There's a lot to like in it, no doubt.
So, you know, I think at this point, which is maybe why I dragged my feet a little bit on even bringing it here, I've asked people so many questions that I feel at this point I'm comfortable with it at this point. And I do feel that it's important for our district to support the tenants in this, because they're things that we've talked about almost every meeting. So, but I do understand your questioning, because it's kind of why I've held off. This has been going for a whole year already.
Are there any groups that are
Not right now, no. There are groups that are anti for particular tenants in here, different thoughts, but not against Vision 2020, no. Legislators are adopting it now.
What's the downside to the board if we like 90% of this, but we're uncertain about the other 10%?
If you're really uncertain, my recommendation would be let's not vote on
Or
it.
what's the downside to the board?
Well, I think we're casting our lot in. We're building momentum for something that can be used for
That's
a lot of different purposes then. So somebody can stand up and say, see, 100% of the school districts in this state have voted for equitable funding. Therefore, what we're going to do is give every school district the very same budget. You just don't know how it's going to be used. That's my
true.
concern. Right.
That's true.
Yeah, it's sort of giving our name to it in advance of knowing how our name will be used.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a little uncomfortable to me.
I would encourage all of you to get on the website. There's a lot of information on it. I believe very strongly in everything that's on there. I think they've done some great presentations. There's a nice video that I've chosen to keep tonight for time brevity. But I really do believe strongly that this is something that all of you believe in, but I share some of your same concerns.
Good. Thanks.
So we have a couple of weeks to do our own explanation.
And I can always move it to the vote for next month. The 457 will go up and we just join it when we decide we're going to join it.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. And my feelings aren't going to be hurt because I think everyone has to be comfortable if we do choose to approve it. I would like to approve it at this point. I'm comfortable, but it's taken me several months to get to that point.
All right. F, summer school. Salaries, camps, fees, additional summer school help, and summer custodians.
Jay and Kevin.
In your
board packet this evening is a proposal for summer school programs and fees. While in the past, you guys have not typically approved all of these fees or items, we really felt as an administrative team that this was important to bring forward for transparency's sake and to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what we're doing. And so there are several different parts of our summer school programs. The first one is the summer school program itself, which is made up of the kaleidoscope programs, summer support, and then extended school year. The pay rate hourly is based on what we have provided and paid teachers in the past for summer school. And we've been discussing this with the members of the summer school team as the year has gone on. The other pieces that are included there besides the summer school program, which are outlined sort of in detail on that second page, are all of the summer programs and all of the summer camps that are primarily athletic based camps that Dan Williams has run for us in the past, and a lot of those funds during the summer that have been gathered during the summer have gone into the sort of athletic fees fund and been used to support athletics during the school year. And so we again felt it was important to make sure that the board had oversight for that. And so those are outlined there in terms of the times and costs for each session. And then the last piece is, as for the last 2 summers, we have provided a summer algebra academy and summer math academy. We've done that on our own as a district. We want to continue to expand to that, but it's also needs to be a program that is really in line with our board policy related to student residency. And in order to do that, it's our recommendation that we work with Educational Solutions Northwest, Janice Heigl, our consultant, and her organization to have her run the academy independently of Lake Bluff 65. So that means that we would pay them a blanket rate. I'm sorry, I'm speaking. I hope I'm speaking loud enough.
You're fine. Don't worry about it.
The blanket rate and that will be approved as a part of a separate contract. So
Really, this is not much different than what we've done in the past, but we all feel like this. You approve all the other fees, and you need to approve our summer school fees also. So we will be bringing this to you every year from now on, so that you know what's happening in the summer. There is a cost for summer school. Our parents pay it, so I think as board members you need to know about that.
So is it break even?
It has historically not been break even, and that's another reason for the oversight. I think that since Jay and I have really come on board, we've been working with Carly Quick, who is the summer school coordinator, to really provide some differential oversight for that. It's not close to breaking even, and in some cases, right now, it's not really possible to break even. We have to provide extended school year services for kids with disabilities. We only get about $700 in reimbursement, if that, from the state during the summer. Though, surprise, surprise, that's one of the things that's not going to be cut, according to them. And so, in some ways, it's just not possible to break even. But Jay and I are working our hardest to make sure that we come far closer to breaking even than we have in the past.
So in general, what is the cost of summer school to the district?
Past year, somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000.
So I think, summer school, a lot of districts have eliminated summer school. So those are just things that we have to keep in the back of our mind. What Kevin's alluding to as far as the math camp, we have to follow board policy even in the summer. And so that means we really can't be having kids from out of district, because our residency is we only take kids in district. We don't allow out of district people to come in and pay us tuition if they don't live within our boundaries. So that has to apply for summer also, and so the way to get around that, Kevin worked with Terry Hodges, is to have Janice's company is coming in to run the summer school. So therefore, it's
Summer
not
math.
really
The summer math program.
summer math, the math program only, what we've called the Math Academy in the past. So,
Couldn't we amend the board, change the board policy for just summer school if we wanted to do that?
no,
Okay.
Terry did not recommend that at all, and she said residency board policies are extremely touchy, because once you open the door, it's opened.
Okay.
And I think from previous issues, that's just something we don't want to do, and she didn't recommend it either.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
So, any questions on that? Because we'll be bringing that to you for your approval in 2 weeks.
All right, moving on. Item G, the amended 2014-2015.
There's just one other thing. I don't know if you had any questions on the summer custodians. That was a separate memo, but we wanted to, for the first time, hire some temporary seasonal summer custodians to help Steve get all the stuff done this summer. In the past, we've used GCA overtime really to help get everything done, and I think it's more cost effective to hire this temporary summer labor, and it gives opportunities for summer jobs to high school and college kids in the community.
That's not a bad idea.
So where's the cost net out on that? The
Um,
expense?
I think it will be, it depends on the workload and scheduling. I mean, I think it'll probably be, will cost $7,000 to $10,000 depending on how many we hire for the summer help. And we've spent between $6,000 and $10,000 on GCA summer work. In 1 year, we spent quite a bit more than that. So that's why I don't want to commit to a number, but it's pretty
Roughly
cost
comparable.
neutral.
And it would be opened up like part-time work to kids.
We would post it externally. I mean, it would be open for application to anyone. And
I'm intrigued by the idea of part-time work for, high school kids or I don't mean me. For kids home from college, kids home from college
We
or
can't
high
hire
school.
Mark because that would be a
No,
conflict.
no, I don't want
You have
that.
to resign your position with the board member, so we will not allow that.
That would interrupt my life of leisure, right? I couldn't do that. But I think it's a great
I
idea.
think
Can you limit it to residents or people living within the school district only? Probably not enough.
I don't
To be considered.
I don't know
To
if
be
we
considered,
legally
we'll see.
you could
right.
do that, but you would interview people and
Yeah.
select them.
Like how the Park District hires all those kids locally for
Right.
positions.
Actually, Jay's been working with the Park District to make sure we're comparable in our salary offerings. So we feel very comfortable with doing this, and actually the majority of districts do this. It actually provides us more control rather than having to call GCA and say, all right, we're running late. We can actually move with the kids while they're here for the summer.
And then the guys who are on staff can do more of the complex things and things that we need them to do, and
Sure.
these guys can do more of the everyday stuff. So
So the school calendar, you've seen this already 10 times for changes. I just want to point out that this is the final approved calendar. I don't care.
Sure.
We will not have any flooding for 14-15, which means our last day of school will be June 5th, which is an early release day, keeping in mind that the law changed it. We cannot have a half day. It has to be only an hour early release on the last day. So this is the final calendar. Now I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Very good.
I've got
That's
no
it.
questions.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything they need to raise? Any public comment from anybody in the audience? That huge audience that we have.
We also know,
Questions, clarifications?
I think from the entire board agenda tonight, what I'm remembering is that we need to be able to bring more information on the projections to help further that discussion.
Yes.
And I think maybe we'll keep the resolution for Vision 2020 on, and we may just waive the vote and bring it to the next month. I think we just discussed that too.
And I would also encourage the board and the community to spread the word about our need for a new board member and to direct people to the website for the application, and it's due April 29th. And if anybody has questions or concerns, they can contact myself through the email address on the board. I'd be glad to talk to anybody about what it requires to become a board member. So, can I have a motion to come out of to
So moved.
Second.
Second. Yeah.
whatever I was about to say all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
That's how I felt.
We're out.
I could not get my words tonight at all. Recipe.